As part of our corporate venture video series, I'm thrilled to have a subject matter expert on artificial intelligence here with us today, Gayathri Radhakrishnan, her friends call her G, from Micron Ventures. Hi, G.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Thanks for making a little bit of time for us today.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Let's see, about 7 years ago, we were together in the Kaufman Fellows Leadership Program. You were collaborating with Dell Ventures. I'm just curious, I've been able to stay in touch with our friends at the Kaufman Fellows Program, attending some of the modules, doing a little bit of mentoring, occasionally guest speaking. I know they're doing a lot of stuff with corporate venture. How have you kept in touch with the team at the Kaufman Fellows Group?
Absolutely. Great question, because I think right after Dell, I was doing startups. So most of my interaction was informal, reaching out to fellows like yourself and connecting with them. I was actually consulting with Trish Costello, who sort of founded the program. And most recently, I've gotten much more active. I'd also been attending the Kaufman Fellows women's sort of events in Bay Area. Yeah. But recently, I connected with a fellow from class 24, I believe, and we just kicked off the Kaufman Fellows Deep Tech special interest group. And I'm also actively participating in the CVC special interest group. So it's been great to sort of reconnect and reignite some of the relationships in the Kaufman.
Oh, that's great. We both made some great friends through that program, and it was a phenomenal experience. How are you, just briefly, how are you and your family doing? Obviously, it's crazy time with COVID-19 virus. I'm finding that with all the negatives, I try and look for the positives, including, a few meals a day with my family, and we're working out together. And so those types of things. How are you and your family holding up?
We are one of the lucky ones, I think. I have family with me. It's great. So it's been sort of a built-in support system as well for the kids to also have their grandparents to talk to, besides me and my husband when we are stuck in meetings all day and things like that. I'm actually making an active effort to spend more time with my kids. It's been a little hard because it's easy to get sucked into work. So I'm trying to make an active effort to set some time to hang out with my kids as well.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about your journey from the Kaufman Fellows days and collaborating with Dell Ventures to where you're at now at Micron. Why don't you just kind of talk a little bit about your journey?
Absolutely. It's been quite the ride. I left Dell when the software division got spun out. At that time, I decided that it was probably better for me to go back to a startup environment. And so I left Dell. And then I was working with a startup as their head of product in the connected home space. It was really a wonderful, wonderful time. After about a year into that, one of my GMs at Dell reached out to me, and he was looking for a VP of product. He joined startup as CEO, so I got the opportunity to. I really enjoyed working with him when I was at Dell, so I decided it would be a great opportunity to kind of redo that to some extent. So went back and did VP of product at that startup. You definitely learn a lot when you're in a startup. You're kind of thrown in the deep end, it's sink or swim. And you definitely, it's a very enriching experience, I find. So after that, I would joke that I went through my own midlife crisis, took some time off and did my own sort of classical Indian dance recital. And in June of last year, I joined Micron Ventures in the venture arm, actively investing from our AI fund.
And so they've publicly announced this $100 million fund focused on artificial intelligence. Much of the world is now buzzing about artificial intelligence. And it reminds me of the early days of the internet when it was viewed as a core technology, not knowing exactly where it would apply. And now it's clear that the internet applies to most markets. That's how Impact Venture Capital, that's how we've talked about artificial intelligence, is really looking at the application in a variety of markets because it does seem to apply everywhere. What's your view? What's your perspective on artificial intelligence and the application to different industry sectors and markets?
You're absolutely right. These days, pretty much every company has an AI angle. I definitely look for certain depth from a technical standpoint. back in the day during cloud days, we used to call it cloud wash. When every company kind of claimed to be a cloud company. So I'm looking to make sure that it's not an AI wash and there's something really truly technical in the company. So clearly define sort of areas that we focus on from an investment standpoint. We are looking at true AI sort of applied in verticals like manufacturing, healthcare, automotive, and agriculture to some extent. We are also looking at what I call core AI, so technology that enables AI. This could be hardware like, AI accelerators. We are investors in Sambanova and Mythic. We are also looking at software from a similar lens. So when we look at it from specific verticals, I think the impact of AI becomes really obvious, right? So that's one of the ways I kind of look at AI, our AI investments now.
We've invested in an artificial intelligence company in the robotics space, an AI in the high performance computing space that we've talked to you a little bit about, AI for video and in retail. It's interesting to see where this is going, and we're finding that AI is applying in a lot of different areas. Are there particular industry sectors that you're focused on? Is there a portfolio company or two that you'd like to mention where you think it's a good example of sort of the application of AI in a particular market space?
Absolutely. So, we are investors in a company called Omniture, which is focused on sort of the bioinformatics pipeline for genomic sequencing. So if you think about a genome that's sequenced, the data that comes out of the sequencer can be pretty large, terabytes sometimes even, to parse through that and understand what that means is critical, right? And you doing it in a faster timeline is also super important. So Omniture enables that. They want to enable a future where you can get genetic testing at almost like a similar pace as a blood test, right? So that is sort of, they enable that process. Similarly, we've invested in a company called Nexar, which is focused on sort of helping various departments of transportation, like a regional transportation committee, things like that, to identify something as simple as, hey, there's a construction going on. This is going to impact traffic for my city. How can I better navigate that? Or a street sign's down and it's a liability for the, the users of the roadways and also for this county. The only way they can solve it now is to put a guy in a car or some vehicle and have him roam every street. But Nexar automatically lets them know when something is down, right? So, and they have use cases beyond that into like ADAS and other areas like even HD mapping for autonomous vehicles and so on. So very interesting companies in our portfolio. Do check it out.
Celebrate the entrepreneurs that are watching this today or in future viewings of this. Can you just talk a little bit about the typical stage, check size, sort of how you typically who are the co-investors that you typically include in investments that you make into early stage companies?
Absolutely. So stage these days is kind of fluid, I guess. But that said, we typically invest in, I would say, Series A, B, and C is kind of our sweet spot. We typically try to stay away from seed because we're looking for some level of product market fit. And then from a check size standpoint, they've varied. We've done investments for anywhere from $1.5 million all the way to 10 million, but again, from a sweet spot, I would say it's probably more in the 2 to 5 kind of range.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then as you're targeting sort of and doing due diligence on quality management teams, a lot of what we discussed during conversations with the Entrepreneurs Organization is sort of, professional development, sort of how to sort of take your game to the next level as a CEO. Can you talk a little bit about how you sort of target management teams and in particular the characteristics of the CEO or founder that you find, interesting and sort of, that you ultimately invest in? Is there some, pattern that you've seen of the CEOs and founders that you're investing in?
It's an interesting question because I think one of my colleagues and I were recently talking about sort of founder traits, right? So I personally lean towards founders who are very resilient. I do believe the success of a startup depends very largely on the founder's capability to manage different things that get thrown at them, right? There were companies in February that didn't have to think about, they were not thinking about Corona. And then suddenly Corona happens. As it is, I think entrepreneurs have to deal with lots of variables. And then, new things just get added to their plate, and it's how they respond to that. And how are they demonstrating leadership skills within the company to keep the company on the right sort of track and focus. So that's one thing I look for. And I essentially look for that through my reference calls and such. But then I also look for how is the leadership team complemented, right? How complementary are they? So if the CEO is super technical, do they have a very solid sales and BD type person, right? Or if the CEO is much more on the management side, do they have a visionary CTO or technical person who can sort of think about the future, the roadmap, but is also receptive to market sort of feedback? So that's another thing that I kind of look for. Both those are two big things that I tend to look for.
And then when you invest in these companies and these teams, are you finding ways in which you add value beyond capital? I mean, I know you well enough to know that you can be a valuable sounding board strategically for the direction of some of these companies. And so my guess is that you're playing a valuable role as an advisor for some of these CEOs. How else now in your role at Micron are you providing value beyond capital?
So as you rightly pointed out, it's it's a couple of areas, right? So I am on the board as an observer for some of the companies, so I get to sort of intimately see what issues they're facing more in a more real time fashion. So I try to tailor my sort of help based on where you get the most bang for your buck in terms of the startup itself, right? So in some cases for startups, it'll be in terms of outreach, helping them connect with potential customers, helping them go through a POC process or something like that. In some cases, it may be in terms of fundraising, finding the right sort of investors that they should be talking to, connecting them. In some cases, just connecting them with folks in the industry who can provide value to them. Brought specifically back to Micron, I also feel like there's a lot of expertise within the company. As a technology company, we have a lot of technical leaders within the company. So with most of our portfolio companies, especially those that are strategic, I try to do a quarterly engagement with the business unit. So the portfolio gets direct access to our leadership from that standpoint, and they can drive an agenda that's also beneficial for both the companies, right? So those are some of the ways that I try to assist.
Yep, that's helpful. Thanks for that. As we wrap up here, let's see. I've got a couple questions, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience here to maybe ask a couple of questions. But just if you don't mind, a couple of sort of rapid fire questions on the personal and sort of professional development front. A big part of what we do within the Entrepreneurs Organization is experience share. We experience share about what's going on personally with families, with business. And the spirit of it is that we learn from each other. It's a real world focus group. Sometimes I've referred to it as sort of my advisory board for life, because I've got a lot of respect for the professional accomplishments and the personal characteristics of the people that are on the line today. And so hearing about how they're navigating through sort of life's challenges and in some cases how they're bringing their A game to the business world as they play a leadership role with their not just their families, but with their communities and with their businesses. You are, a very accomplished dancer. You've obviously demonstrated a level of dedication and discipline and training to do some of the things you have done as a dancer, which is sort of a side passion of yours. When you look at sort of establishing professional excellence and bringing your A game to corporate venture for a major corporation, are there sort of certain things, certain routines, certain disciplines that you bring to try and sort of elevate your game professionally in the corporate venture space?
Yeah, so, I think you're very kind, but in general, I think what has helped me and is having had the opportunity to be across the table in all sort of situations, right? I've sat as a startup, one of the management team members in a startup that's going through the process of company building. I have sat on the other side of the table as an investor. As you know, before Jack, before Dell, I used to be an institutional VC with a firm in Germany. So I've had the chance to work on the other side as an early stage investor funding startups. So that's definitely helpful. And then finally, I've also had the opportunity to sit on the acquisition side, thinking about a corporate strategy, thinking about what is important for the corporation, what are the things that we look for from an acquisition standpoint, and interacting with a startup or a larger size company with that perspective. And I think that's definitely helped me in terms of the tool set in my portfolio of tools that I can leverage for best practices, right? So when I talk to startup, being able to empathize with them and being able to put myself in their shoes has given me a perspective which I think I might not have had if I was only doing a corporate where, I know there's a steady paycheck that's coming every month, right? Whereas a startup has to deal with so many issues. So that empathy has definitely helped. And right now, from a corporate standpoint, as I mentioned, having worked in a larger company situation, knowing when to escalate things and when not to, right? And that's important too, because I can keep hankering with business unit leadership about a certain portfolio, but if their mind is on sort of near-term quarterly results for the street, they're not going to pay attention to my portfolio company, right? So knowing the right timing to make those contacts, making those introductions, I think that's another thing that my sort of past experience has helped navigate in this situation.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, G. I really appreciate that.